Hi friends, welcome to this latest episode of the Nationalist View, and today we have with us a very special guest, Professor Hillel Frisch. Professor Frisch, thank you so much for joining us. Professor Frisch is joining us from
Thank
Israel.
you.
So, Professor Frisch is Senior Research Associate at one of the leading think tanks, Jerusalem Institute of Security in Jerusalem, and he's also Professor Emeritus, Department of Political Studies and Middle Eastern Studies in the very prestigious Bar-Ilan University. And we are going to talk about the current situation in Gaza, or as well as in a larger perspective, because Professor Frisch has done extensive work on, especially on Arab nationalism. So we are going to talk about some larger issues also. So Professor Frisch, my first question is that we have seen what is happening in Gaza. The hostages who were alive, they have been handed over. However, the bodies of some of the captives, which Hamas had taken on 7th October 2023, so they have not been handed over yet. Also, Hamas is giving indication that it is not getting ready. It is not ready to get disarmed, and it has started shooting people of the rival uh, gangs, you can say, or has started shooting rivals on the streets of Gaza. So, how do you see the situation panning out? Largely, can Hamas be trusted? Because a lot of trust has been put on, Hamas in terms of that it'll meet the promises which it has made.
Well, I mean, the Trump plan is definitely from outside in, from top, it's top to bottom. And usually the burning political and military issues are a problem of the inside and from the bottom going up. So this is the classic problem of the Trump plan as it was in the Oslo peace process. I mean, what do the local actors do? And how do you implement it? So, one of the major aspects of the 2021 uh, points of the plan was, of course, the disarmament of Hamas. I don't think that Hamas ever really gave an official recognition of that or acceptance of for disarmament, and now we're seeing it played out that it's not only not disarming, but in their rhetoric and in their media sites, they are saying that all these moves are being made by the Ministry of Interior and Internal National Security, which is the Hamas ministry that was created in 2007 and never disappeared. This means that they have all the intentions of not only killing what they see as agents of Israeli agents in Gaza, but that they have full intention of governing Gaza. Um, it, it of course all depends on what Trump will do. I mean, Trump said that if you don't disarm, and it seems exactly the opposite of any kind of disarmament, that all hell will break loose. I mean, I don't know what he intends doing. Maybe the Americans have these cluster bombs that can really destroy the underground, the tunnel infrastructure, which is really the source of Hamas strength. I don't know, but it certainly looks, from the vantage point of view of today, that Hamas is totally in denial of any kind of disarmament. And of course, I think it's it's using it's using the bodies. I mean, they've returned eight out of the 28 bodies. They claim that they can't find them. Hard to believe. There, there will probably be an issue over a few bodies that they really can't find, but most of them they certainly can find. But they're using that time to destroy the human intelligence that Israel lacked before the October 7th attack, and which it built up during the 2 years of war. This is the first aim of Hamas to destroy that infrastructure that Israel might have created during those 2 years, using the hostages, using the dead hostages as buying time to do that.
Sir, you had argued in one of your recent articles that neither the Palestinian Authority nor the no Arab states they can manage actually Gaza in the post-Hamas period. So Trump has also proposed, a kind of an authority, a kind of a techno political authority, you can say. So, what kind of alternative governance models do you see can be successful in Gaza?
It, I mean, the Trump plan proposes an international stabilization force. I mean, and above that, a sort of a supervisory committee, which Trump will head. The problem is that before you have stabilization, you have to disarm Hamas. Now, Hamas is probably, next to the IDF, the most powerful military body in the Middle East. Why so? Because it's been fighting for the last 20 years. I remember asking an American general who was an advisor to the Taiwanese national forces, and I told him, "Well, will they be able to give a good fight to the Republic, to the People's Republic of China?" He said, and this is the guy who was training them for years. He said, "You know, the last time they fought was 1956. This was in 2000. You know, I mean, if the Egyptians are supposed to do it, they haven't fought a real war since 73. And they weren't hot shots against the Islamic State in Sinai. They finally more or less prevailed over them, but it took many, many years and a lot of cooperation with Israel. You're talking about the Saudi forces that basically lost to the Houthis in Yemen. Similarly, with the United Arab Emirates, and they have very, very little real fighting experience. And you're asking them to deal with Hamas, who managed to survive after 2 years of IDF total war. That this time the IDF used all of its power, and it was winning. It was winning, clearly winning, but still, there's. I mean, this is wishful thinking. Now, the only military power that has the experience and the might to deal with Hamas is the United States, and that's the most problematic for Israel, because as Edward Luttwak, a major military analyst who works for the DoD, the Department of Defense, the American Department of Defense, says the one great virtue of Israel for the United States is that it fights on its own. It might get military aid, it might get financial aid, but there have never been American boots on the ground. as opposed to Americans' boots on the ground in Germany, in South Korea, in Poland. No American has died. No American soldier has died on Israel's behalf. But the moment that happens, the special relationship between the United States and Israel is in jeopardy. And the strategic relationship with the United States is vital to Israeli security. That would be the worst possible scenario for Israel. I mean, it would really be tragic to have Americans dying on our behalf, and they'll die. There's no doubt about it. To root out Hamas will involve American casualties. I don't know how many, but it will, and that'll change the name of the game in the relationship between the historic relationship between the United States and Israel.
So now
So
let's, yeah.
so this is really problematic, and you can't be optimistic about it. The only real solution, is total military is defeat of Hamas, an Israeli military rule, and then we can talk about plans for peace. So how this is going to be solved, I'm not very optimistic.
So let's talk a little bit about Arab nationalism. We have seen during the Gaza conflict, during this recent conflict also, and earlier also, while the Arab nations do pay a lot of lip service to the cause of Palestine, but in reality, Egypt has a border, with Gaza. It did not allow any of the refugees from there to enter into Egypt. Similarly, other countries also in the while, as I mentioned, that they pay a lot of lip service, but there seems to be inner contradictions in terms of their ground level approach on the issue of Palestine, and in terms of we have seen that quite obvious in the recent Gaza conflict, the recent Israel-Hamas conflict also. So how do you see this? There's a lot of talk about Arab nationalism. There's a lot of talk about Arab identity. So is it a reality, or is it merely a myth?
Okay, so there was, a very seminal article published by Fuad Ajami. Ajami was a Lebanese Shiite who later became a very prominent American intellectual and a professor at the Johns Hopkins SAIS, which is a very prestigious international diplomacy school, which is part of Johns Hopkins. He entitled it "The Death of Pan-Arabism," and this was an article from 1978. So the death has been a long time. What he meant by the death of Arab nationalism was the quest for a unified Arab state. In fact, the quest for a unified Arab state polarized the the Arab world between two or three potential hegemons, of course, Egypt and Iraq. That no longer exists. I mean, that's been dead for decades. But on the other hand, Arab nationalism as a cultural construct still exists. If you look at the so-called Arab Spring, that didn't even yield one democracy, because the only democracy that it yielded for quite a few years, Tunisia, has become more dictatorial than even under the rule of the ruler who ruled until 2010. So if you look at the so-called Arab Spring, the borders were really of that whole phenomena were Arab-speaking states, and you have to ask yourself, Why? Why only Arab speaking states? Why didn't it spread to Iran? Why didn't it spread maybe to other places in the world? So there is still something about Arabness. So it's a cultural construct. I would say that there is a kind of Arabness amongst the general population in support of Palestinian national objectives, but even that has weakened over the years. So I don't think there is a cultural affinity amongst Arab-speaking states, but and there's some cultural exchange, but on the political level, it's very very weak. Now, the position that Arab states take about the Palestinians, they certainly don't want Palestinians because many of them are Hamas and many of them are Hamas terrorists. And who wants terrorists? That's one problem. The other problem for Israel is that many Arab states don't mind if Israel bleeds a bit over the Palestinian issue. I mean, they know the Palestinian Arab states know that they have weakened over the past 4 decades relative to the outside non-Arab powers in the region, Israel, Turkey, and Iran. So, to a certain extent, they don't want any of those powers to be too strong. And even though many of the Arab moderate states are willing to make a deal with Israel, as they did in the Abraham Accords, against Iran, which is more threatening, they still don't want an all too powerful Israel. And one of the ways of making sure that it's not all too powerful is that they have an internal problem called Hamas in Gaza. So that's part of the problem. The Hamas problem is going to remain with Israel long after the Trump. I'm afraid to say long after the Trump plan. I mean, there was a famous Israeli hero with a black patch. His name was Dayan, from the '67 war. He had a very famous eulogy for an officer that was killed on the Gaza border. He wasn't only an officer; he was a kibbutznik. He was also a farmer, and he was killed by Gazans, by Gazan Maradors, very much like Hamas today. And he delivered a eulogy that I can tell you, word for word, could be used, unfortunately, for the eulogies of Israeli soldiers, fallen soldiers in 2025 in Gaza today. It's as if the past is living in the present completely. That's the problem.
So,
No
sir,
quick no quick fixes, and I'm sure Indians know about this through Kashmir and Pakistan. You know, this is a problem you can reduce relatively in size at any given moment. It can flare up in another moment, and you have to continue your development and your economic prosperity despite this problem. But it's very hard to solve it.
no, made a very interesting point, sir. In fact, I was having a conversation with Colonel Miri Aisen. We recorded a podcast with her and we broadcast it also. So she had made a very interesting comment, and it was a few months after 7th October 2023 incident. So she said, I had asked her that whether Hamas, do you think that Israel will be able to finish off Hamas permanently? So she said, no, organizations can, like Hamas, so they can never be finished off permanently because it's not an organization with whom you are fighting or against you are fighting. You are fighting against an ideology. So the problem is not the organization as such, beyond the point, the problem is ideology. So how do you look at it? Basically, we have talked about, you said very rightly that there is a cultural construct about Arab pan-Arabism, or what you may call Arab nationalism. And you said cultural, not religious. So how do you look at, going ahead, Israel's, strategic objectives, because you are fighting against an ideology of Islamism or Islamic terrorism,
Right.
or
That took over Arab nationalism.
yeah. So
That
how do you look at
superseded.
this? Yeah.
Listen, I slightly debate her. Nazi ideology still exists. If you look at video, if you look at YouTube, there are so-called historical channels that basically glorify the SS, which was the key killing and fighting force of the Nazi regime, and they have millions of viewers. It means that Nazis, most of these viewers, are sympathetic to Nazism. But Nazism as a political force is still is dead. Is dead. We have the Islamic State only 10 years ago that flared up, but an effective international coalition was able to destroy it. So the organization is meaningful. I'm not an expert on Sri Lanka, but the Tigers were defeated, and for 13 years, the problem is dormant. I'm sure that Tamili nationalism in Sri Lanka hasn't been destroyed, but the organization is. So this is meaningful to destroy the organization. Um, Destroying the organization means that you can have a level of terrorism that you can live with and flourish. Hamas became too strong and was threatening that Israel's ability to continue to flourish despite Hamas terrorism, and therefore we have to destroy the organization. Maybe not completely, but to weaken it considerably, as we did the Palestinian Fatah terrorist nationalist movement, especially in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. The terrorists, Fatah terrorists, still loom and occasionally produce terrorism. But again, it's a terrorism that Israel can live with and flourish, and that's what we have to do in Gaza. So it's true the ideology never dies, but the level of effectiveness is certainly can certainly change.
So you talked about how, because largely our discussion, and globally the discussion, whenever now we are talking about Israel and Gaza and this conflict which is happening there and the attack on Israel. So Hamas is at the center stage, and the country which actually built Hamas or which funded Hamas largely basically was Iran, or is Iran. So how do you see, with Hamas taking the center stage in Middle East? So how do you see, has Iran, despite being, kind of, there was a this Operation Rising Lion in which Israel and US jointly, so they inflicted heavy, damages on Iran, and Iran seems to be standing down right now. But do you think that overall the rise of Hamas has also strengthened the position of Iran in the Islamic world?
No, I think the greatest boon of the war in Gaza and Hamas is basically what happened to Iran and its major proxy, Hezbollah. I mean, I think Netanyahu is completely right that he's been able to change the balance of power in the Middle East. I mean, Iran's leverage has been destroyed. I think that Iran is the major loser in the Hamas war. The ring of fire or the unity of arenas has completely failed. Even more, until the Israeli-US attack in the 12-day war in June, there was fear that all hell would break loose were Israel and the United States or both to attack Iran. If Iran was attacked, and Iran was attacked and weakened considerably, and absolutely nothing happened. The proxies did not participate. Oil prices hardly reacted. The Iranian threat against US military bases and personnel never materialized. Iran lost its deterrence, and so did Hezbollah. I mean, there's living proof of this. Israel kills Hezbollah terrorists who violate the agreement brokered by the United States, trying to rebuild its terrorist infrastructure in southern Lebanon. So this is absolutely the boon of the Hamas of the Hamas war. Suddenly, this tremendous threat proved to be little more than a paper tiger. Now, it's true that Iran is a country of 90 million. It could potentially rebuild, but it's not going to be very easy. Iran, just to give you one example, Iran realizes that missiles are not effective. They have to build an air force. Building an air force, even if China provides even some kind of credit and provides its I can't remember, but it's the name of 14, which is equivalent to the American F-22. Building an Air Force infrastructure is a matter of hundreds of billions of dollars. It's going to be very hard for the Iranian regime to build that kind of capabilities. Certainly under Trump, impossible. And then even later. And you're talking about a project that will take 15, 20 years, which is certainly above your and my capability of even foreseeing. So I think Iran has been considerably weakened, and it was weakened for a considerably long time.
Sir, my last question is that how do you see now, as you mentioned that the balance of power has changed in Middle East, and so how do you see this situation panning out? Are we going to see a more conflict-ridden Middle East? Are we going to see more peaceful Middle East uh, post this, Israel-Hamas conflict situation? How do you see this, and how this, if you can elaborate a little bit more on how the regional power balance or has shifted and has changed. So,
Okay.
and what will how it will impact the peace and kind of a positive atmosphere in Middle East.
Since my white hair is very visible, I have a long perspective. I mean, I've been a student of the Middle East for the last 50 years, and I can tell you, while I'm pessimistic over Gaza as a local major local issue, I'm very optimistic about the regional perspective. I think Arab states are certainly becoming, for decades, they're in a process of evolving pragmatism. And I think the Hamas war was proof that this pragmatism prevails, despite the fear of the Arab street and their sentiment for Palestinians. Not one of the states that had a peace accord of old, like Jordan and Egypt and Jordan, because Egypt is more important, reneged on the peace process. Not one of the countries in the Abraham Accords withdrew from the Abraham Accords. This, as a student from dating back from the 70s, this is almost messianic. I mean, if they could in a war like Gaza, where Israel had to hit in civil civic infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, because the Hamas were hiding behind it. This is proof of the pudding that that pragmatism is going to prevail. And I'll be even more optimistic. It's going to prevail because internationally, the Democratic Alliance, and there will be an alliance between the United States and India, and it'll be a full alliance. The Democratic Alliance, which Israel is a part of, will prevail and over any other challenge, and that'll feed into greater pragmatism in the Middle East. So my international vision of things to come is certainly very positive, because democracy has the moral upper hand, and in a world of geostrategic politics, moral right always prevails, as we saw in the Second World War, and that's what I think is going to play out in the coming decades.
Thank you, Professor Frisch, for taking time out from your busy schedule and sharing your deep insights with us. And thank you, viewers, for watching this show. And we'll be back soon with another podcast. And we'll continue to keep a very close watch on Middle East and what we call West Asia, also in our part of the world. And we hope to host Professor Frisch again soon and learn from his deep insights. Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining.
you for having me once again. Bye bye.